you've got one particular religion which seems to not get along with any other religion, which blows up arenas where little girls have gone to watch their favourite pop stars, which encourages its advocates to cut the throats and decapitate little girls at a dance class, which encourages their ardent followers to stab British soldiers, which actually thinks that throwing chemicals on a woman's face to maim her if she's refused your advances, or stoning someone to death because of rape, or cutting off her clitoris and destroying her genitals because that is somehow a ritualistic practice that purifies them, whether it's, allowing a grisly old man to marry a 9-year-old girl, whether it's advocating that actually if a woman doesn't cover herself up completely, she is to be shamed publicly, and that if someone is not an advocate of your religion, then they can be taken as sex slaves during times of war, which is pretty much any single time of day or night according to some people who follow that faith, then it is normal to be frightened of it. Okay, when I walk around London and I see barricades outside the Palace of Westminster, okay, I know that they're not there in case somebody nods off at the wheel of a black cab. I know they're there because an Islamist tried to mow down people on the pavements of Westminster Bridge. So it isn't irrational to be frightened. And yet, just as we're about to have, hopefully, a conversation about what went on with Muslim men targeting, raping, mutilating, torturing, abusing, grooming, drugging, killing little white girls, vulnerable white girls. Just as we're about to potentially have that conversation, the Labour Party are putting on rocket boosters their push for Islamophobia. I'm going to introduce you now to a wonderful woman who I absolutely adore. She's an ex-Muslim commentator, a women's rights advocate, Nouria Khan. Nouria, oh my God, I just wanted you on the programme today so much because it is so important that we get voices like yours to talk to us about Islamic attitudes towards women. When we are talking about having an Islamophobic definition, it's going to prevent the sort of conversation that you and I need to be having and the whole public needs to be having.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having this discussion, because we're moving into extremely dangerous territory with this bill, and more scarily kind of what's in it in terms of the individual clauses, because I was just listening to you earlier, and even, comments that you were making, which are rooted in fact, as you said, actual statistics as well about migration and sexual violence crimes. Things like that now are going to be considered Islamophobic if you state basic facts. So what the issue is that they've conflated Islamophobia with racism and saying that it targets expressions of Muslimness and that perceived Muslimness. So for somebody like me, who is an ex-Muslim and who came from that faith, when you make criticism of Islam indistinguishable from the hatred of Muslims, that means I can now no longer freely, openly critique the Quran. I can't challenge the misogyny within Sharia itself, which has wider implications, as you said, for women's safety in the UK in general, with what happened with the grooming rape scandals, predominantly by Muslim men from Pakistani backgrounds. Apparently even using the term Asian grooming gangs is now deemed racist, then Islamophobic. It's got all of that conflation. And if I just merely speak about my journey and what I've gone through, then I would be deemed racist and Islamophobic. So our very existence is rooted in challenging this perceived Muslimness that the Labour Party are trying to ban.
I get the impression as well, when we look at sort of leaked intelligence reports and security reports from France and things that we know about some of the advocates of the community leaders who have been sort of recommended against by Michael Gove, put on a watch list of perhaps Cage and Mend and other such organisations, are not helpful when it comes to community relations, but instead are vectors of Islamism. I get the impression that the push to have a definition of Islamophobia isn't coming from moderate Muslims who have integrated, who just fit into British society and culture. I get the impression it's coming from the militant campaigning Islamists who actually now want to have leverage over how much they can get away with.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you see that if you kind of look into the meat of the Islamophobia bill itself. There's talking points in there about Kashmir and, Muslims wanting some kind of independent nationhood. So if you have an issue with slogans like "From the river to the sea," or you have a difference of opinion on the future of Kashmir. These are literally Pakistani talking points, and we're importing them here and trying to pass them off into law. And then basic things, for example, I critique the religion because that's the religion I was born into. And if I am stating a fact verbatim from the Quran or the Hadith now, that would deem me Islamophobic and make it illegal. So you've got Muslim prominent Islamist scholars and Muslim, they're called the Dawa people who, proselytize religion on YouTube and things like that. And they openly say things like Islam is an expansionist religion. We want Sharia in the UK. Our loyalty is not with Britain. If I repeat those same words, their talking points, I'll go to jail.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I've spoken to many Islamists myself who talk about the Ummah comes first, that being a Muslim is important, and actually we don't belong to a state or a country or a continent. We belong to the religion of Islam. But I'm very, very concerned about the sort of people who are being dragged in or invited in to help construct this legislation. And like you said, it is often a campaigning religion, an expansionist religion. It wants to evangelise, for want of a better phrase, and get more recruits. And it has no interest in signing up to the values of democracy. It has very specific views in the Quran on women and how women should dress and how women should be treated, particularly non-Muslim women. And we're not having a conversation, are we, about Sikhophobia or Christianophobia or Hinduophobia. We're not even really having any sort of conversation about anti-Semitism. It's only about Islamophobia, when this is the conversation we need to be having, because all those other religions, frankly speaking, are not trying to harm us.
Precisely. And I think, as you mentioned, alluded to, the timing is highly suspicious, that just when we're getting to the root causes and as a society we're moving towards being honest and frank about what happened over those 2-3 decades with these white working class girls, so much of it comes down to religious justification that these perpetrators were clearly voicing, and they're well documented in the victim survivor stories. And just when it's, we're getting to that stage as a society, suddenly this bill comes down to put a legal muzzle, if you will, on all of this kind of talk. So if I state that these men actually had a different view of these girls, that can be found within the Quran itself. They were inspired by that. They were quoting Quranic verses to these girls as they were beating some of them, trafficking them, raping them. But yet now the Labour Party is trying to push this through and silence not just people like myself who speak out, but reformers and, most importantly, victims.
Do you know, if this goes through, I'd be minded to actually get out of the country, because my feet wouldn't touch the ground. I'd be dragged in front of a court of law in no time whatsoever for my views on the dangers of Islamism in the West in general. Nouria, thank you ever so much. It's so good having you on. Do you know what's going to happen, folks? Everyone's going to have watched Nouria's brilliant interview and think she's such a class guest. You'll see her all the time on Talk Now. The other presenters are going to steal her off me, and so they should, because she is such an important voice, a very brave and intelligent young woman.